struggling young woman, still bitter over her ex, impulsively kisses a stranger, completely unaware that he's a millionaire. What happens next will leave you speechless. But before we dive into the story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Sit back and enjoy. Emilia Cooper's day had already taken a disastrous turn. First, a deranged pigeon ruined her breakfast. Then, her eccentric boss made her rewrite an entire article over a supposed punctuation catastrophe, only for her to later realize that the so-called errors were just smudges on his glasses. But nothing? Absolutely nothing, compared to the gut-wrenching sight of her ex-boyfriend standing inside an upscale jewelry store, sliding an engagement ring onto another woman's finger. "Oh no," she muttered under her breath, instinctively ducking behind a necklace display. Too late. Hugo Carter, the same man who dumped her 3 months ago with some absurd speech about relationships being a capitalist trap, was right there, holding hands with a stunningly beautiful woman. And worse, he was putting a ridiculously expensive ring on her finger. "Do you like this one, my love?" he asked, his voice dripping with a tenderness Emilia had never once heard directed at her. Her stomach churned. The woman let out a sugary giggle, holding up her hand to admire a diamond that might as well have been the size of a satellite. "It's perfect, darling. I can't wait to be the future Mrs. Carter." Emilia felt the floor beneath her tilt. A full-scale meltdown was imminent, and just when she thought the situation couldn't get any worse, Hugo's gaze locked onto hers. For a fleeting moment, Emilia swore her soul left her body. He looked at her with that insufferable smirk, the one that practically screamed, "I moved on first, Emilia." "Great," she said through clenched teeth, forcing a smile as she straightened up. She turned ever so slowly, feigning enthusiasm. "Hugo, wow, what an absolutely unexpected and not at all awkward surprise. You still live here?" He raised an eyebrow, regarding her as if she were some relic of the past that should have long since faded into obscurity. "And you still breathe?" Emilia crossed her arms. Shocking, isn't it? The woman on his arm, Ilara apparently, let out a practiced little laugh and clung to Hugo possessively. "Oh wow, Emilia, you look exactly the same," she cooed, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "It's like time hasn't touched you at all, right?" Emilia felt her blood pressure spike. She plastered on her own saccharine smile. "And you look more artificial? What happened? Did one of your Instagram filters accidentally leak into real life?" Ilara's jaw clenched. Hugo cleared his throat, clearly eager to put an end to the passive-aggressive battle. "So, are you seeing anyone?" he asked, casually but pointedly. Emilia stiffened. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head, his smirk deepening, as if expecting confirmation that she was still single, still nursing a broken heart, still crying into a tub of ice cream, while Adele played in the background. And as if that weren't bad enough, Ilara leaned in, eyes twinkling with false concern. "Oh, Emilia, you're still single, aren't you? But don't worry. There's still time. Some people find love after 40. That was it. The last shred of her patience snapped. Ahead Emilia could fire back, she suddenly felt a strong arm wrap around her shoulders. "Hey, sweetheart," a deep, velvety voice murmured right beside her ear. Steady, smooth, and utterly effortless. Before her brain could even process what was happening, a warm hand settled on her shoulder, holding her with such ease that anyone watching would assume they were a real couple. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. Have you been waiting long?" Hugo and Ilara paled. Emilia hadn't planned this, hadn't even thought, before her body acted on pure instinct. She turned, faced the mysterious stranger, and kissed him. It wasn't just any kiss. It was reckless, desperate. A kiss born out of sheer survival, and the most astonishing part, the stranger kissed her back. Not in shock, not hesitantly, but with absolute, unshakable confidence. Somewhere in the background, Emilia heard Ilara's sharp gasp and the sound of Hugo gritting his teeth. Mission accomplished. When she finally pulled away, Emilia turned back to them, flashing the most smug, self-satisfied smile she could muster. "So, what was that question again?" Hugo looked like he had just swallowed a live frog. Ilara's grip on his arm tightened, her expression a mix of disbelief and fury. And just when Emilia thought the spectacle couldn't get any more ridiculous, the stranger beside her decided to take things a step further. "Shall we go, darling?" he said, his lips curving into a playful smirk. We still need to pick out that wedding ring." Emilia nearly choked. Wedding? Who even is this guy? Before she could protest, he was already steering her away, effortlessly leading her through the mall as if they had been together for years. And that was the precise moment she realized the colossal mistake she had just made. She hadn't just kissed some random stranger. She had kissed Maxon Scott, the wealthiest, most powerful, most untouchable billionaire in the entire city, and, judging by the amused glint in his eyes, he was enjoying every second of it. Emilia had made plenty of questionable choices in her life, dyeing her hair neon green as a rebellious teenager, buying impossibly tight shoes just because they were on sale, and, of course, the infamous drunk texting her ex incident. But kissing a total stranger in the middle of a crowded shopping mall, that was a new personal record. And now, as if things weren't absurd enough, she was being kidnapped by him. Well, maybe kidnapped was an exaggeration. But Maxon Scott was certainly dragging her through the mall like they had a dinner reservation and were running late. Emilia tried her best to ignore the stares. Of course, people were staring. Maxon Scott looked like he had walked straight out of a billion-dollar suit commercial, while she was standing there in a t-shirt featuring an angry unicorn. The sheer contrast between them was so extreme that anyone would assume he had hired her as a background extra in his perfectly curated life. "Wait," Emilia said, abruptly planting her feet on the ground, forcing him to stop. Maxon turned, one brow lifting in amusement. "What just happened?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with a look that suggested he was enjoying this far more than she was. "Well," he mused, "you kissed me, and I kissed you back. Would have been rude not to." His smirk deepened. Emilia blinked. "Rude? That was practically a wedding toast." "It was not," he corrected. "And if it were, then clearly we need to work on our performance." Her soul nearly left her body. "For the love of God, who are you?" Maxon's eyes glimmered with amusement. "You really don't know?" Emilia frowned. "Should I?" "This is fascinating." "And terrifying," Maxon remarked, his lips curling into an infuriatingly smug smile. "No need to thank me for the rescue." Emilia stared at him in disbelief. "Rescue? I didn't ask for help." Maxon tilted his head, unimpressed. "Your ex was treating you like a worn-out shoe. Did you really want me to just stand there and watch?" Emilia opened her mouth to argue, then snapped it shut. Dang it, she thought. The worst part, he had a point. Not that she'd ever admit it. "Great," Maxon continued, raising an eyebrow. "Now that I've performed my heroic deed, we can move on with our lives." "Not even a thank you?" he added. "Should I be expecting a heartfelt card that says, 'Thank you for making my life even more complicated'?" Emilia shot him a glare. "A dinner, you owe me dinner." Maxon blinked. "Excuse me?" "You owe me," she repeated, crossing her arms. "For what?" "You're the one who kissed me on impulse." "Consider it a compensatory impulse," she shot back. Maxon let out a low chuckle. "And if I say no?" She narrowed her eyes. He shrugged. "Then I'll tell your ex that we're madly in love." Emilia choked on her own breath. "You wouldn't dare." Maxon leaned in slightly, his smirk deepening. "You want to test me?" Emilia shut her eyes and exhaled sharply, searching for an escape route. Unfortunately, none existed. "Fine," she muttered. "One dinner." Maxon grinned. "Perfect. I'll pick you up at 8. Emilia pointed a finger at him. "If this turns out to be some billionaire human sacrifice scheme, I want a lawyer," Maxon chuckled. "You'll survive." Emilia wasn't so sure about that. Hours later, she found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "What am I doing?" she mumbled to herself. She was about to have dinner with a man she had kissed without even knowing his name. This wasn't a date. This was a desperate cry for therapy. But there was no backing out now. With a resigned sigh, she grabbed her purse and went to face her fate. The restaurant was so fancy that Emilia felt like she should be wearing a crown. The dim lighting, the gleaming chandeliers, the sound of live piano drifting through the air. It was surreal. Even the waiter looked at her as if he could already sense her bank account wasn't prepared for this. "If you need a kidney, I can donate one," she muttered as they sat down. Maxon smirked. "That won't be necessary." "In that case," she continued dryly, "I'll have a plate made of solid gold and a diamond-studded glass." Maxon let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. He leaned back in his chair, utterly at ease, while Emilia tried not to feel like a complete imposter in a place where even the napkins probably had stock portfolios. "So, Emilia," he said, resting his elbow on the table, "tell me about yourself." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I like knowing who I'm having dinner with." Emilia crossed her arms. "I work, I pay bills, and occasionally I kiss strangers in shopping malls." Maxon's smile deepened. "Fascinating. Tell me more." "Strangers as an escape plan from ex-boyfriends?" Maxon mused, his smile playful. "Fascinating. Would you say that's a natural talent or self-taught?" "Sadly, no technical courses exist for it." "A shame. I'd enroll immediately." Emilia rolled her eyes. "And what about you? What do you do besides being an insufferable billionaire?" Maxon leaned back, his expression amused. "I manipulate situations to my advantage," Emilia scoffed. "Yeah, I noticed." Maxon merely shrugged. "And yet, here you are, having dinner with me." Emilia stared down at her glass of wine. "I didn't have much of a choice," she muttered. Maxon chuckled, and despite herself, Emilia realized she was actually enjoying this bizarre conversation. Then he dropped the bombshell. "I have a proposal." Emilia frowned. "If it involves anything illegal, I'm out." Maxon smirked. "Stay with me for a month." Emilia choked on her water. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me." She gasped dramatically. "I knew it. This is a human sacrifice scheme?" "Not at all." He swirled his wine lazily. "I just need you to pretend to be my girlfriend." Emilia stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking. "Why?" Maxon took a sip of his wine before answering. "Let's just say, certain people need to believe it." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And you decided I was the best choice after one impulsive kiss?" "No doubt." Her face warmed. "And what exactly do I get out of this?" Maxon leaned in slightly, his smirk deepening. "Whatever you want." Emilia bit her lip. This is insane. It was possibly the most ridiculous idea she'd ever heard, but she couldn't deny there was something tempting about it. She had never been the impulsive type. She was the kind of person who spent 30 minutes debating an ice cream flavor, the type who agonized for days over whether to buy a new outfit. And yet, here she was, sitting across from Maxon Scott, the richest man in the city, seriously considering a fake relationship contract. She exhaled sharply and leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend for a month, and in return I can ask for anything I want?" Maxon nodded, his half-smile never wavering. "Exactly." Emilia narrowed her eyes. "And why me? You could hire a professional actress, a model, someone with actual class and fewer unicorns on their shirt." Maxon's gaze flickered to the angry unicorn on her t-shirt, his smirk deepening. "The unicorn has personality. I respect that." Emilia let out a frustrated sigh. "Focus, Maxon. Why me?" Maxon leaned in slightly, his gaze steady. "Because you didn't know who I was." Emilia blinked. "And what does that have to do with anything?" "You kissed me without knowing who I was. That was an accident. A great accident, might I add." Maxon smirked, but she wasn't letting him off the hook that easily. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "You still haven't explained why any of this is necessary." He swirled his wine glass between his fingers, his expression unreadable, as if carefully choosing his next words. "Let's just say my family has certain expectations, and a very important event is coming up. If I show up single, it's going to be problematic." Emilia crossed her arms. "What kind of problem? The kind that involves a million invasive questions, an attempted arranged marriage, and possibly a full-blown documentary about your love life?" Maxon exhaled through his nose, his lips twitching. "You have no idea." Emilia really tried not to laugh. This was absurd, ridiculous, but also kind of hilarious. And if she thought about it, there were some definite perks for her, too. For starters, Hugo would see that she'd moved on. She'd get an all-access pass into the glamorous world of the ultra-wealthy, and if things got unbearable, she could just walk away. Maxon, clearly reading the internal debate written all over her face, tilted his head and smirked. You're thinking about saying yes, aren't you? Emilia frowned. Don't put words in my mouth. I don't have to. I already know your negotiation style. She narrowed her eyes. Oh, really? And what exactly is my style? Maxon leaned back, studying her like he had already won. First, you make a dramatic scene, then you pretend you're not interested, but deep down, you're way too curious to turn it down. Emilia's mouth fell open. That's not true. Maxon raised a single eyebrow. No? Then say no. Get up, walk away. She shut her mouth. Maxon chuckled. Darn it, she muttered, looking away. You got me. Because, as much as she hated to admit it, he was right. When else would she ever get a chance to see what life was really like in the billionaire world? Emilia took a deep breath. Okay, I'm in. But I have conditions. Maxon's smile widened. Of course you do. She held up a finger. First, I'm not your employee. I won't take orders from you. Maxon's expression darkened with amusement. I never thought following orders was your strong suit. Good. She leaned forward. Second, I want something in return. Maxon crossed his arms, intrigued. And what's that? Emilia smiled. You're going to help me get a better job. Maxon blinked, momentarily caught off guard. You want a job? Yes. I'm done with my current one. If I'm going along with this insane plan, I want something useful in return. He studied her for a moment, then held out his hand. Deal. Emilia hesitated, staring at his hand. She knew she was about to step into something completely outside her comfort zone. But, you know what? Why not? She shook his hand. Deal. Maxon's grin widened. Welcome to my world. The next morning, Emilia woke up to a message on her phone. Maxon. I'll pick you up at 10. Wear something comfortable. She frowned. Comfortable for what? Knowing Maxon, it was unlikely to be a casual stroll through the park. And sure enough, at exactly 10 a.m., he arrived in front of her house, in a car that probably cost more than the entire house. Emilia stepped outside, eyeing the sleek vehicle before looking at him. Seriously? Isn't this a little excessive? Nothing is too much when you have style, Maxon replied smoothly. She rolled her eyes and climbed into the car. So, where are we going? Maxon gave her a cryptic smile. You'll see. Emilia didn't like surprises, but apparently Maxon loved them. And when they finally reached their destination, she quickly realized why he'd been so secretive. A luxury boutique. She turned to him, confused. What are we doing here? Maxon held the door open for her. If you're going to be my girlfriend, you need to look the part. Emilia froze. Wait, are you saying my clothes aren't good enough? Maxon glanced pointedly at her unicorn t-shirt. I think your unicorn could use a little vacation. She gasped, utterly offended. This unicorn is a symbol of personality. Now it can be a symbol of retirement. Emilia huffed, but stepped inside, still grumbling under her breath. Half an hour later, she found herself drowning in dresses, each one worth more than her entire monthly rent. She tried on a few, feeling like a complete imposter in the middle of all this extravagance. But then she caught Maxon watching her, a satisfied look on his face, as if he was actually enjoying this ridiculous transformation. And that's when something shifted. He was really committed to this charade, and strangely enough, she was starting to find it all pretty amusing. Emilia was still trying to wrap her head around the fact that for the next month, she would be Maxon Scott's fake girlfriend. The whole situation felt like something straight out of a soap opera, where the main character accidentally stumbles into a crazy deal and suddenly finds her life turned completely upside down. And right now, that was exactly how she felt. Riding in a luxury car on her way to a high society event, Emilia sat beside the most sought-after billionaire in town, trying not to let her nerves show. Unlike Maxon, who drove with the calm, effortless ease of someone completely in his element, her stomach twisted at the thought of the sophisticated crowd she was about to face. Are you sure this is a good idea? She asked, gripping the hem of the ridiculously expensive dress he had bought for her. She still couldn't believe she was wearing something this luxurious. If she spilled juice on it, she'd probably have to sell a kidney to cover the damage. You already agreed to the deal, so there's no backing out now, Maxon said, throwing her an amused glance. Besides, you'll do great. Just smile, wave, and don't try to run away. Running away is sounding more appealing by the second, she muttered, crossing her arms. Remind me again how you convinced me to do this? I'm very persuasive, he replied smoothly, eyes still on the road. Emilia huffed, but didn't argue. He was persuasive and annoyingly difficult to refuse. When they arrived at the venue, Emilia immediately felt like she was in the wrong place. The ballroom was massive, dripping with elegance, filled with impeccably dressed people swirling champagne in delicate crystal glasses, their conversations polished and effortless. This was the kind of world she had only ever seen in magazines or movies. Definitely not one she belonged to. Just stay by my side and act like you belong here, Maxon murmured, taking her hand before stepping inside. Easy for you to say, she muttered, but she let him lead her in. The reaction was immediate. The moment Maxon entered, heads turned, conversations quieted, eyes flickered toward them, curious and scrutinizing, assessing the mystery woman at his side. Emilia could feel their gazes, analyzing her every detail, silently questioning who she was, where she had come from, why Maxon Scott, who never brought a date to these events, had suddenly arrived with her. She inhaled deeply, straightening her posture. She had agreed to this, so she needed to act like it was completely normal. Then a smooth, poised voice cut through the hum of conversation. Maxon, what a pleasant surprise. Emilia turned just as an elegant woman approached. She wore a flawless dress, her posture effortlessly graceful, a charming smile on her lips. But her eyes were locked on Emilia, scanning her from head to toe with sharp curiosity. Maxon's expression remained polite, his tone unreadable. Claire, always a pleasure. Claire smiled, but there was an unmistakable edge to her voice. I'd say the same, but I'm far more intrigued by your company. You never bring a +1. Maxon, completely unfazed, casually wrapped an arm around Emilia's waist, pulling her closer with practiced ease. This is Emilia, my girlfriend, he announced, smoothly, so naturally that Emilia almost laughed at how effortlessly he delivered the lie. Claire's eyebrows lifted, genuine surprise flickering across her features. Emilia matched her smile and extended a hand, doing her best to sound as confident as she definitely did not feel. Nice to meet you, she said, her voice steady. The pleasure is mine, Claire replied, shaking Emilia's hand, her curious gaze lingering a little too long. No offense, but you don't seem like the kind of woman Maxon usually brings along. Emilia kept her polite smile in place, though inside she was dying to ask exactly what that was supposed to mean. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. Well, I guess he decided to switch things up a bit. Her voice was light, unbothered, like this entire conversation was just casual small talk. Nothing more. Beside her, Maxon let out a quiet chuckle, clearly enjoying the exchange. Claire, however, studied Emilia for another lingering second before shifting her attention back to Maxon. I hope she's ready for this world, darling. Not everyone can keep up with you. Maxon didn't even hesitate. I think she's doing just fine so far. Claire's smile was all charm, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Without another word, she turned and gracefully disappeared into the crowd, most likely to immediately spread the news. Emilia exhaled, then shot Maxon a look. I don't like her. Most people don't, he said casually. She rolled her eyes. You could have warned me that these people are intense. You didn't ask, he replied with an infuriatingly playful smile. The next hour was a blur of polite nods, introductions to people Emilia had never seen before, and conversations about investments, corporate mergers, and extravagant vacations. She tried to look interested, but honestly, she was more focused on not tripping over her dress. Then, just as she thought she was getting the hang of it, a very familiar voice called out from behind her. Emilia! Her stomach twisted. She turned, already bracing herself, and there he was. Hugo, of course, he was here. Because the universe loved making her life complicated, he stared at her, his expression frozen in pure shock, as if the very idea of Emilia being at an event like this was beyond comprehension. And clinging to his arm, as always, was Ilera, who looked equally stunned. What are you doing here? Hugo asked, still blinking as if he expected her to vanish into thin air. Before Emilia could answer, Maxon moved. His arm slid around her waist, his hand resting lightly but firmly against her side, almost like he was preparing for battle. "She's with me," Maxon said smoothly, his voice calm but carrying just the right edge of amusement. "I thought that was obvious." Hugo blinked, clearly thrown off. You two are together?" Emilia smiled, seizing the moment. "Yes, we're together." Hugo opened his mouth, then closed it. Opened it again, no words came out. He glanced between Emilia and Maxon, like he was waiting for someone to burst out laughing and admit it was all a joke. Ilara finally spoke, her arms crossed. "Since when?" Emilia barely missed a beat. "For a while now," she said smoothly, keeping her tone as casual as possible. Hugo still looked stunned. Maxon, on the other hand, looked very pleased with the situation. "Well, it was nice seeing you both, but we really must be going," Maxon said smoothly, steering Emilia away before Hugo or Ilara could recover enough to ask any more questions. The moment they were out of earshot, Emilia finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "I can't believe he was here," she muttered under her breath. Maxon glanced at her, his expression laced with amusement. "An interesting coincidence," he mused, "and I must say, you handled it very well." "I'm an excellent actress," she replied, trying to ignore the way her mind was still spinning. Maxon's lips twitched. "So, are you ready to keep going with the plan?" Emilia took a deep breath. The first challenge was behind her. Now she just had to figure out if she could keep up this act without losing herself in it. She exhaled and straightened her shoulders. "Let's see where this goes." Maxon smiled as if he already knew the story was far from over. And deep down, Emilia knew it too. She still wasn't entirely sure how she had managed to get through the night without tripping over her dress, saying something completely wrong, or accidentally exposing their very fake relationship. But somehow she had pulled it off. The real problem, however, was that now, sitting across from Maxon Scott in one of the most luxurious offices she had ever stepped foot in, she realized this madness was just beginning. The contract. "So, let's make it official," Maxon said, flipping through a stack of documents with the ease of someone who did this sort of thing every day. "Here's the contract outlining our agreement." Emilia narrowed her eyes. "Contract? You're joking, right?" Maxon raised an eyebrow. "Of course not. This is business, Emilia. You didn't actually think we'd just shake hands and hope for the best, did you?" She crossed her arms. "I kind of hoped it would be simpler. Nothing involving my family is simple," he replied, sliding the papers across the table toward her. "Besides, the contract ensures that you won't be at a disadvantage." Emilia picked up the documents and skimmed through them. The terms were clear, almost too clear. She was expected to accompany him to social events, maintain the public image of their relationship, and, most importantly, keep everything confidential. In return, Maxon would secure her a new job and cover any expenses related to their arrangement. She let out a low whistle. "Wow, this feels like one of those movie contracts where the heroine ends up falling for the billionaire boss." Maxon smirked. "If this were a movie, we'd already be halfway through the story." She rolled her eyes. "So, I just sign this and for 1 month I'm officially your girlfriend?" "Exactly," he confirmed. Emilia bit her lip, considering it. "What happens if I want to back out halfway through?" Maxon's expression remained calm. "Then you let me know in advance, and we end things quietly." He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "But of course, it would be best to avoid that. After all, my family is expecting me to finally have a stable relationship." Emilia raised an eyebrow. "A fake, stable relationship?" Maxon's smirk deepened. "Details." Emilia held back a laugh. "Stable life? You barely know me." Maxon's expression remained impassive. "My family doesn't need to know that," he replied smoothly. She sighed, glancing back at the contract. She knew this was completely insane, but honestly, she didn't have much to lose, and if nothing else, this whole situation would make for a great story one day. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the pen. "All right, let's do this." Maxon smiled, satisfied, as she signed her name on the dotted line. "Welcome to the agreement, Emilia." As she handed him the document, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into an entirely new world. The days that followed. To Emilia's surprise, the next few days passed much faster than she had expected. At first she thought pretending to be Maxon's girlfriend would feel awkward, but somehow he made it seem natural. Their schedules were packed with events, and to her surprise she was actually starting to keep up with the fast-paced rhythm of his world. That evening, Maxon picked her up for yet another high society charity event. This time, Emilia knew exactly what to expect. Curious glances, subtle questions, and, most likely, some light provocation from people who knew him. But instead of feeling nervous, she was starting to understand how this world worked. "You're getting good at this," Maxon remarked as he drove. She smirked. "Thank you. I learned from the best." "I hope that wasn't sarcasm." "Just a little," Maxon laughed, and Emilia realized that, despite how bizarre this arrangement was, they were actually getting along. The charity event. As soon as they arrived, they were met with flashing cameras, photographers eager to capture the city's newest power couple. Guests whispered amongst themselves, their curiosity about Maxon Scott's mysterious girlfriend outweighing their interest in the actual charity cause. Emilia held her posture, recalling everything she had learned from previous events. Smile, nod, and avoid getting pulled into conversations that could complicate their story. And for a while, things went smoothly. But of course, since nothing in her life ever went smoothly, it didn't take long for the unexpected to happen. "Maxon, darling?" A woman's voice echoed through the room, smooth and confident. Emilia turned just in time to see a stunning woman approaching them with a dazzling smile. She was tall, elegant, and, judging by the look in her eyes, someone who had known Maxon for a long time. And ex-Maxon's expression remained polite but noticeably cooler than usual. Olivia. Emilia didn't miss the way Olivia's eyes flicked to her, quick, assessing, before shifting back to Maxon. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" she asked, her tone light but carrying a sharp edge beneath the charm. Without missing a beat, Maxon placed a hand on Emilia's waist, pulling her just a little closer. "This is Emilia," he said smoothly, "my girlfriend." Olivia's eyes sparkled with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Girlfriend? Well, that's unexpected." Emilia pressed her lips together, sensing that this conversation was about to get very interesting. "Love is full of surprises," she replied with an easy smile. Maxon held back a laugh while Olivia arched a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "Well, Maxon has never been easy to win over. You must be someone very special." Emilia blinked innocently. "It's actually easier than he seems. You just have to know which buttons to press." Beside her, Maxon cleared his throat, clearly catching the hidden meaning. Olivia let out a light laugh, but Emilia could tell it wasn't entirely genuine. "Well, I hope you two are happy," Olivia said, her tone pleasant, but her eyes still studying Emilia with sharp interest. "But if you ever need advice, just know, I've been where you are." Emilia tilted her head slightly and smiled. "Thanks, but I think I'm doing just fine so far." Maxon wrapped an arm around her, giving a light squeeze. "You definitely are," he said smoothly, shutting down the conversation before Olivia could press further. The moment Olivia walked away, Emilia let out a breath. "Ex-girlfriend?" she asked, just to confirm. "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "Did things end well?" Maxon exhaled through his nose, a flicker of amusement in his gaze. "Let's just say we had different views on what a relationship should be." Emilia narrowed her eyes. "That is a very vague answer." Maxon smirked. "And you ask too many questions." Emilia laughed, shaking her head. No matter how much she tried to figure him out, Maxon always had a way of dodging her questions. A new comfort. The rest of the night passed in a blur of elegant conversations, subtle glances, and polite social maneuvering. For the first time, Emilia realized she didn't feel completely out of place. What had started as a purely professional arrangement was beginning to feel comfortable. And that, if she was honest, was a little scary. By the time Maxon pulled up in front of her building, she felt exhausted, but oddly satisfied. She had never imagined she would adapt so quickly to a world so vastly different from her own. As she reached for the door handle, she glanced at him. "So? How long until your family stops doubting we're a real couple?" Maxon chuckled. "Probably never, but don't worry, we're doing just fine." Emilia nodded, about to step out of the car when... Emilia. She turned back. For a brief second, Maxon hesitated. Then, his lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You're better at this than you think." Emilia felt something stir inside her, but she ignored it. "I'm amazing. You just took too long to notice," she teased, winking at him before stepping out of the car. As she walked away, she realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was actually having fun. But what did that mean? She had no idea, and maybe she didn't want to know, not yet. Emilia was just starting to get used to the idea of being Maxon Scott's fake girlfriend, or so she thought, until the next morning when he casually dropped an entirely new bombshell over coffee. "Dinner with my family tonight." Emilia nearly choked on her drink. "Dinner with your family?" She widened her eyes, clutching her coffee cup like it was her last lifeline. "You forgot to mention that tiny detail in the contract?" "It wasn't in the contract," Maxon admitted, barely looking up from the stack of documents he was reviewing. "But it is part of the deal?" "That's not fair," she argued, setting her cup down with a dramatic thud. "You know I'm terrible at keeping up appearances. What if I say something wrong? What if your family figures out it's all a lie?" Maxon finally glanced up at her. "Then just do what you do best," he said smoothly. "Improvise." Emilia groaned. "Easy for you to say. You were born into this world. I don't even know which fork to use at a formal dinner." Maxon's lips twitched. "Just follow my lead. You'll be fine." She folded her arms, still skeptical. "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely." Emilia exhaled loudly. This is going to go so wrong. Meeting the family. The moment Emilia stepped into the grand hall of the Scott family estate, her first instinct was to hold her breath. The place was breathtaking. Ornate chandeliers, towering ceilings, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. It was the kind of home where you felt like you had to walk carefully in case you accidentally stepped on something absurdly expensive. And then there was the dining table. Long, impeccably set. The plates alone looked more expensive than her entire rent. Maxon's family was already gathered when they entered. The moment they stepped in, all eyes turned toward her. A tall, elegant woman with a refined appearance and a warm smile stood beside Maxon. Maxon greeted her first, placing a kiss on her cheek. "You finally decided to visit us, Mom." Then, turning toward Emilia, he introduced her without a hint of hesitation. "This is Emilia, my girlfriend." Emilia felt Maxon's mother's gaze analyzing her, sharp, observant, assessing. Then, to her absolute surprise, the woman's expression softened into a warm smile. "Emilia, dear, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you," she said kindly. "Maxon never introduces us to anyone. We were starting to think he planned to live alone forever." Emilia hesitated for just a second before flashing a confident smile. "He finally realized he wouldn't be able to live without me," she joked, throwing Maxon a knowing look. Maxon smirked ever so slightly, like he was enjoying this far too much. Maxon held back a laugh and casually placed a hand on her back. "Exactly. Well, sit down and let's eat." His mother gestured toward the table, and Emilia took her seat beside Maxon. Luckily, the conversation started off easy. His mom asked about her life, her work, how she and Maxon had met. Emilia followed the plan, effortlessly weaving the story they had rehearsed. Everything was going surprisingly well, until the doors to the hall opened. A man entered. Maxon's entire demeanor shifted. His posture stiffened, his jaw clenched ever so slightly. "Dad," he murmured, his tone carefully neutral. Emilia straightened instinctively. So this was his father. The man carried an undeniable presence, serious, composed, with an air of quiet authority. His suit was impeccable, his steps deliberate. As he approached the table, he greeted Varian, but his gaze settled firmly on her. "So," he said slowly, eyes assessing. "This is Emilia?" "Yes," Maxon replied firmly. "My girlfriend." A pause. His father studied her, unimpressed. "Interesting. You've always avoided serious relationships, and now, out of nowhere, you show up with someone." A heavy silence settled over the table. Emilia felt the weight of those words. He wasn't convinced, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she smiled, her voice light yet steady. "Love has its own timing." Maxon's mom smiled approvingly, but his father's gaze remained sharp. "And how did you two meet?" Emilia opened her mouth, ready to deliver their practiced story, but Maxon beat her to it. "In a bookstore," he said, completely composed. Emilia blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She turned to him, confused, but his expression remained effortlessly calm. "I was holding a book I wanted to buy," he continued smoothly. We both reached for it at the same time and started arguing over who should get it. It took Emilia half a second to catch on. Right, improvise. She rolled her eyes, slipping into the story as if it had really happened. He tried to argue that he saw it first, she added with a huff. But I wasn't going to give up that easily. So she challenged me, Maxon interjected, amusement flickering in his voice. To a coffee, Emilia finished, playing along. Whoever convinced the other would get the book. His mother laughed. And who won? Me, obviously, Emilia said smugly. Maxon scoffed. Don't kid yourself. I let you win. Laughter erupted around the table. Even his father's expression finally relaxed. And just like that, they had won. Dinner continued with ease. Conversation flowed from travel to business to upcoming family events. Emilia did her best to keep up, responding naturally, engaging when needed. Slowly, something shifted. Despite the initial tension, she found herself enjoying Maxon's mother's warmth. Even his father, though direct and calculating, had a way of speaking that she found oddly intriguing. By the time they finally said their goodbyes and stepped outside the mansion, Emilia let out a long, heavy sigh. I thought I was going to faint in there. Maxon smiled. You did great. Emilia exhaled, running a hand through her hair. Your dad almost knocked me down with just a look. Maxon chuckled. He's like that with everyone. Don't take it personally. She shot him a skeptical look. Are you sure he bought it? He hesitated for a second before answering. He still has doubts, but for now, we're doing fine. Emilia sighed. Great. So all we need to do now is keep up this act until the deal is done. Maxon stayed quiet for a moment, watching her. You think this will be easy? She smiled. Compared to today, definitely not. The problem was, Emilia still didn't know what was coming, and maybe things were about to get a lot more complicated than she thought. The car ride home. Emilia was still processing everything that had happened at the Scott family dinner. She wasn't sure how, but she had made it through alive, without stuttering too much, without tripping over herself, and most miraculously, without knocking anything over. But one thing was certain, Maxon's dad wasn't convinced. As they drove home, Emilia glanced sideways at Maxon. He looked calm, his hands relaxed on the wheel, his expression unreadable. He seemed satisfied with her performance. She wasn't. Your dad didn't believe it, she said, breaking the silence. Maxon didn't even blink. He has doubts, he corrected, but so far, he hasn't called us out. That's because he's waiting for the right moment, Emilia shot back, crossing her arms. Did you see the look in his eyes? He didn't buy that story for a second. Maxon shrugged. He can be suspicious all he wants. The important thing is that we're still in the game. That doesn't comfort me, she muttered. Maxon smirked, throwing her a sideways glance. I'm paying you not to worry. She stared at him. You're not paying me. I am, he countered smoothly. With expensive clothes, fancy dinners, and an experience you'd never have in your life. Emilia narrowed her eyes. I still haven't decided if this experience is worth it. Oh, you're loving it. Emilia opened her mouth to argue, then shut it again. Damn it, the worst part was, he wasn't entirely wrong. The next morning, Emilia woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. She blinked, still groggy, and reached for her phone. The second she opened her messages, her eyes widened. The first text was from a friend. Emilia, are you dating Maxon Scott? The second, from another friend. How come you have a billionaire boyfriend and didn't tell anyone? The third, from an unknown number. Hello, we're from a magazine and would like to interview you about your relationship with Maxon Scott. Emilia nearly dropped her phone. Oh no. Emilia's eyes widened as she scrolled through her phone. There were at least 15 more messages, all variations of the same question. What's going on? She murmured, still half asleep. Then, she clicked on one of the links, and that was when she realized the gravity of the situation. There she was, on the front page of a gossip site, standing next to Maxon. The photo was taken at dinner the night before. He had his hand on her waist, and she was smiling at someone in his family. Maxon Scott finally confirms a relationship. Who is Emilia Cooper? The woman who won over the billionaire? Emily let out a choked sound and threw the phone onto the bed as if it had caught fire. No. This wasn't part of the plan. Before she could fully panic, her phone started ringing. She glanced at the screen. Of course. Maxon, taking a deep breath, she snatched the phone back up and answered. "Did you see this?" she blurted before he could even say hello. "Good morning to you too," Maxon replied, far too amused for her liking. "And yes, I saw it. How did this happen?" "Reporters do that," he said, as if it were no big deal. "It's not like we were going to stay under the radar forever." "But now everyone's talking about it," she snapped. "People are texting me. I even have magazine reporters asking for an interview." Maxon let out a slow sigh. "Ignore it. It'll blow over in a few days." Emilia huffed. "Do you really think it's going to be that simple?" "Of course," Maxon said smoothly. "The media always finds a new story." She wasn't convinced, but at the moment, she didn't know what to do. "This is only going to be a problem if you let it," he added, his tone maddeningly calm. "Now, are you ready for the event tonight?" Emilia froze. "What event?" "A gala dinner," Maxon replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Be ready by 7. "Maxon," she groaned, "you cannot just throw this stuff at me." "Of course I can. It's in our contract." Emilia gritted her teeth. "You love seeing me panic, don't you?" "I like seeing how you handle it," he corrected, far too pleased with himself. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "You're lucky I can't back out of this deal right now." "I know. See you at 7. And before she could protest any further, he hung up. Emilia stared at her phone, seething. This man is going to drive me crazy. At exactly 7, Maxon arrived to pick her up. Dressed in a sharp suit, he looked like he had stepped straight out of a magazine. Effortlessly elegant, perfectly composed. Meanwhile, Emilia was still adjusting her dress, trying not to trip over her own feet. "You look beautiful," Maxon said the moment she slid into the car. "You're only saying that because you have to keep up appearances," she replied, fiddling with her earrings. "What if I'm telling the truth?" She turned to him, narrowing her eyes. "You never say anything without a reason." Maxon's lips curved into a sideways smirk. "Smart." Emilia rolled her eyes, but the compliment lingered longer than she wanted to admit. The gala. The second they arrived at the venue, Emilia realized this was going to be much worse than she had imagined. The place was swarming with photographers and high society elites, their eyes sharp and calculating, ready to dissect her every move. Maxon stepped out first, composed as ever. Then, before she could hesitate, he reached for her hand and led her down the red carpet. "Just smile," he whispered. Emilia plastered on a perfectly rehearsed smile, but her heart was racing. The flashes of cameras, the murmurs, the endless whispers, she felt like she had been dropped into a scene from a movie she did not audition for. Runes inside the grand ballroom, Maxon pulled her close. She let out a slow exhale, realizing she had been holding her breath. "This is too much. You get used to it," Maxon murmured. Emilia wasn't so sure about that. The night unfolded in a blur of handshakes, polite smiles, and strategic small talk. She did her best to keep up, but the entire event felt like an elaborate play, except she hadn't been given the script. Then, just when she thought she was getting a handle on things, someone grabbed her arm. She turned sharply, eyes widening in surprise, and came face to face with Ilara. "You've got guts," Ilara said, her smile anything but friendly. Emilia blinked. "Excuse me, what?" Ilara crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. "You actually think you're fooling anyone? That you and Maxon are real?" Emilia forced a smile. "Are you jealous?" Ilara let out a short laugh, one that wasn't the least bit genuine. "I just find it interesting. That's all. You were just an ordinary girl not too long ago, and now you're here, acting like you belong in this world." Irritation flared in Emilia's chest. "And what's wrong with that?" Ilara leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "The problem is, I know this isn't real." Before Emilia could fire back, a familiar hand landed on her waist. "Is there a problem?" Maxon's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable weight. Ilara's expression shifted in an instant, a too smooth smile settling on her lips. "No, not at all," she said sweetly. "I was just talking to Emilia about how surprising it is to see her here." Maxon smiled, but there was an edge to it. "Emilia always surprises me. That's why I like her so much." Emilia blinked. She wasn't sure how to react to that. Ilara's gaze narrowed. But she didn't say another word. Once they finally walked away, Emilia turned to Maxon, suspicion in her eyes. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" Maxon shrugged, unbothered. Now she has fewer reasons to doubt. Emilia shook her head with a small laugh. "You love playing with people, don't you?" His smirk returned. "Only when the game is worth it." Emilia wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, but one thing was clear. The situation was becoming more complicated. And the worst part? She wasn't even sure if she wanted it to end anymore. She was still trying to process everything. The dinner with Maxon's family, the endless articles on gossip sites, and now, as if all of that weren't enough, Ilara deciding to confront her directly. It felt like the universe was testing her patience. The gala was still in full swing, with important guests mingling in the luxurious hall. Emilia could feel every pair of eyes on her, but instead of feeling intimidated, she made a decision. She refused to give Ilara the satisfaction of seeing her uncomfortable Maxon. Watching Ilara walk away, leaned in slightly. "You don't have to react to her provocations." "I know," Emilia replied, grabbing a glass of juice from a passing waiter. "But honestly, she needs a new hobby." Maxon let out a quiet chuckle, sipping his drink. "I admit, I expected you to be more nervous about all this." Emilia sighed. "Oh, I am nervous, but after surviving your dad's interrogation and seeing my face plastered on gossip websites, nothing surprises me anymore." Maxon smirked. "Well, maybe you won't be surprised by what comes next, then." She stopped mid-sip, narrowing her eyes. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice laced with false innocence, a tone she had already learned to be very suspicious of. "But I think you should know, my mom liked you." "So much?" she asked cautiously. "So much that she wants to organize a more intimate dinner for us." Emilia nearly choked. "Another dinner? I barely survived the first one," Maxon laughed. "My mom is convinced she's finally found a woman who can handle me. Well, at this point, I'm starting to doubt my own sanity." He glanced at her sideways. "You can still back out," Emilia scoffed. "And give up the chance to keep pretending I'm a millionaire for a month? No way." Maxon smiled, clearly pleased with her answer. An unexpected introduction. The night continued smoothly, no major surprises, until a man approached them, older, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit with an imposing posture. Maxon immediately straightened, his expression shifting into something more formal. "Maxon, it's been a while," the man greeted, shaking his hand firmly. "Mr. Vinny?" Maxon acknowledged professionally. "Good to see you." Emilia quickly realized this was someone important. "How have you been?" "Very well, very well." Mr. Vinny's eyes flicked to Emilia. "And who is this young lady?" Without hesitation, Maxon's hand rested on her waist. "My girlfriend." Emilia smiled and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." Mr. Vinny sized her up for a brief moment before shaking her hand. "The pleasure is mine." Then, without missing a beat, he turned back to Maxon. "So when do you plan to bring Miss Cooper into the world of business?" Emilia blinked. "Wait, what?" She barely had time to process before Maxon smoothly replied, "Soon. Emilia has a lot of talent. She could be a great partner for future projects." "Her what now?" Emilia tried to keep her expression neutral, but the surprise was still very much there. Maxon had never mentioned anything about involving her in business, and now he was saying it in front of one of the most influential men at the event? Mr. Vinny gave an approving nod. "Good to know. We'll talk more about it another time." And just like that, he walked away, greeting other guests along the way. Emilia turned to Maxon, narrowing her eyes. "Can you explain what that was about?" He gave her a small, knowing smile. "Just a little boost to the credibility of our relationship." "You want me to pretend I know about business now?" "You don't need to pretend anything," he said casually. "But if you want a better job, this could be an opportunity." She crossed her arms. "I knew there was some catch to this deal." "Relax," Maxon said, effortlessly grabbing another glass from a waiter's tray. "You'll handle it just fine." Emilia wasn't so sure about that, but before she could press further, the universe decided to intervene yet again. A small but significant detail. As they strolled through the grand hall, a waiter passed by offering appetizers. Distracted, Emilia grabbed one without paying much attention, only to have Maxon grab her wrist just as she was about to take a bite. "What?" she asked, confused. Are you allergic to seafood? She frowned. No, why? Because you just picked up a shrimp canapé, and if you were allergic, this would be a really bad way to find out. Emily looked down at the appetizer, then back at him. Were you paying attention to what I grabbed to eat? Maxon shrugged, completely unfazed. You're my girlfriend. I'm supposed to care about those things. Emilia blinked, processing that. That was unexpectedly thoughtful. Maxon simply gave her a small smile, as if it was nothing, and yet, for some reason, it didn't feel like nothing. Don't get used to it, Emilia said, rolling her eyes, though she couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. The rest of the night passed quickly, and before she knew it, they were in the car on their way home. I think we passed the test tonight, Emilia said, letting out a long sigh. You were great. I know, Maxon replied with mock modesty, earning a playful scoff from her. Emilia smiled, turning her gaze to the window, watching the city lights blur past. Well, now that the entire media believes this story, what's the next step? Maxon was silent for a moment before responding. Now we need to keep convincing my family, Emilia groaned. Oh great, more dinners with judgmental stares. Exactly, she sighed dramatically. If I survive this, I deserve a prize, Maxon smirked. You're already getting a prize, a month in my world. She glanced at him sideways. I'm still deciding whether that's a blessing or a curse. His smirk deepened. You'll find out soon. Something about the way he said it sent a slight shiver down her spine, because deep down she knew he was right. This whole deal was starting to feel more real than it should, and that was exactly what scared her. Morning surprises. Emilia woke up to the persistent buzzing of her phone. For a brief moment, she considered ignoring it. Her body was still exhausted from the night before, and the last thing she wanted was to deal with another wave of surprises. But then she saw Maxon's name on the screen. With a groan, she grabbed her phone and answered, her voice still heavy with sleep. You know, there's something called appropriate hours to call someone, right? Good morning to you too, Maxon replied, far too awake for her liking. Clearly, you've been up for hours. Got plans for today? Emilia frowned, still lying in bed. No. Why? Because we need to reinforce our credibility. That woke her up. She sat up, now fully awake. What exactly does that mean? Photos. She blinked. Photos? Yep. Now that we're officially on the media radar, we need to make sure we look like a real couple. Emilia rubbed her temples. You want us to be photographed together? Exactly. A casual outing, maybe a romantic lunch. Something public enough that people will see and think, oh, they're definitely in love. Emilia sighed deeply. You take this contract very seriously. And you should too. She barely had time to protest before he added, I'll be waiting for you in an hour. Then he hung up. Emilia stared at her phone. This man is going to drive me crazy. Emilia stared at her phone for a long moment, before letting out a groan and burying her face in her pillow. What did I do to deserve this? An hour later, she stepped out of her apartment building to find Maxon casually leaning against a sleek luxury car, the kind that looked like it had driven straight out of a commercial. Of course, he looked effortlessly put together, sunglasses on, posture relaxed, as if this were just another normal day. Meanwhile, Emilia still felt like she had barely processed the situation. You act like you didn't just drag someone into a fake date on zero notice, she muttered as she slid into the passenger seat. Consider it practice for future events, Maxon replied smoothly, starting the car. Future events? Emilia shot him a look. You plan to drag me into more situations like this? You knew what you were getting yourself into. She folded her arms. I knew I'd have to pretend to be your girlfriend. I didn't know that meant being chased by photographers. Maxon smirked. Welcome to my world, Emilia sighed, turning her gaze to the window as they drove through the city. The lunch date, aka PR stunt of the year. Soon, they arrived at an elegant restaurant with a stunning outdoor terrace, perfect for looking effortlessly glamorous while being casually photographed. As they stepped inside, Maxon, ever the picture of charm, pulled out a chair for her. Look at you, a gentleman, Emilia teased, raising an eyebrow as she sat down. Just keeping up appearances, he replied smoothly, taking the seat across from her. She laughed and grabbed the menu, only to realize a moment later that Maxon wasn't actually paying attention to his. "What's wrong?" she asked, lowering her voice slightly. Maxon tilted his head ever so subtly, flicking his eyes in a direction only she would notice. Emilia followed his gaze. A group of photographers stood just a few feet away, pretending to be inconspicuous while angling their cameras directly at them. "Are they already here?" she whispered. "Of course. I told you we needed to look convincing," Maxon said, completely unfazed. Emilia rolled her eyes. "Does this mean I have to look all lovey-dovey while I eat?" "Exactly." She huffed dramatically, grabbing a piece of bread from the basket and pointing it at him. "You do realize this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever done, right? You've said that before, and I'll say it again." Maxon just grinned, picked up his wine glass and raised it in a toast. "Here's to the perfect plan." Emilia clinked her glass against his. "Perfect? I'd call it risky. And where's the fun without a little risk?" She shook her head but smiled, because, as much as she hated to admit it, she was having more fun than she probably should be. A walk in the park and persistent paparazzi. After lunch, Maxon suggested a walk through the park and, unsurprisingly, Emilia quickly realized they had company. "Don't they ever get tired?" she muttered under her breath as the photographers trailed behind them, still snapping away. "It's their job," Maxon said, simply. Emilia sighed, deciding to fully commit. When Maxon took her hand, she didn't pull away. When he smiled at her, she smiled back. And when he leaned in, whispering something near her ear, probably just for the cameras, she laughed, as if he had just told the funniest thing in the world. "You're good at this," Maxon mused, watching her with interest. Emilia smirked. "I'm an excellent actress." Maxon gave her a sideways smile. "Or maybe you're just having fun." She opened her mouth to reply, but was abruptly interrupted by a voice she hadn't expected to hear. "Well, this is interesting." Emilia froze. Her stomach turned as she slowly turned around and came face to face with Hugo. He stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her with undisguised suspicion. "Hugo!" she blurted, caught off guard. He tilted his head. "I thought it was weird enough seeing you with Maxon Scott, but seeing this in person? Now, that's unbelievable." Emilia quickly regained her composure. "What are you doing here?" "Taking a walk," he replied smoothly, though his sharp gaze never left hers. "And you? Playing the part?" Beside her, Maxon remained silent, simply observing. Emilia crossed her arms. "Are you jealous?" Hugo let out a short, humorless laugh. "I just think all of this is very convenient." Emilia took a slow, calming breath. "I don't owe you any explanations." Hugo studied her for a beat before shifting his attention to Maxon. "Are you sure you know what you're getting yourself into?" Maxon finally spoke, his tone polite, but his gaze sharp. "I'm absolutely sure." A flicker of something passed across Hugo's face. Frustration, doubt, maybe even something he didn't want to acknowledge, but he said nothing else. With one last look at Emilia, he turned and walked away. The moment he was gone, Emilia let out a long breath. "That was weird." Maxon shoved his hands in his pockets, his smirk returning. He clearly hasn't gotten over it. Emilia rolled her eyes. "Well, I haven't gotten over how much he embarrassed me either, but that doesn't mean I go around confronting people in the middle of a park." Maxon chuckled. "You handled him well, thanks," she muttered. "But I'd prefer to never have to deal with him again." Maxon's smirk deepened. "Well, with all this media attention, I think it's going to be hard for him to forget you anytime soon." Emilia sighed, knowing he was right. This whole act was working better than expected, but at the same time, it was starting to feel too real. And that was either a good thing or a problem waiting to blow up. Because if there was one thing she was beginning to realize, it was that the line between pretending and reality was getting dangerously thin. Emilia couldn't pinpoint exactly when everything started feeling more real than it should have. Maybe it was during dinner with Maxon's family, when she found herself actually enjoying his mom's company for a few moments, or maybe it was during their walk in the park, when Maxon held her hand, and she didn't mind it as much as she should have. But now, sitting in a cafe, staring at her phone screen, reading yet another headline about the couple of the moment, she realized what was really bothering her. She didn't feel like she was just pretending anymore. "You're staring at that phone like it's about to bite you." Maxon's voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up to see him settling into the seat across from her, placing 2 coffees on the table. Emilia grabbed hers, still distracted. "It's just, all of this still feels unreal." Maxon leaned back, completely at ease. "You've said that before, and I'll keep saying it," she sighed, rubbing her temple. "You might be used to this kind of exposure, but I'm not." Maxon took a sip of his coffee, watching her. "You're handling it way better than I thought you would," Emilia huffed, resting her chin on her hand. "If I had known that one impulsive kiss would turn into all this, I definitely would have run the other way." Maxon smirked. "But it wouldn't have been as fun." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. "So now what?" she asked. "What's the next step?" For the first time, Maxon hesitated. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his gaze locking onto hers. "I want you to stay with me." Emilia blinked. "Sure. The contract isn't over yet." "I'm not talking about just the contract." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Maxon exhaled slowly. "My dad's still suspicious. He wants more concrete proof that we're really together." A chill ran down Emilia's spine. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Maxon hesitated, then said it. "I want you to move into my house." Emilia froze. "What?" "It would be temporary," he clarified quickly. "Just long enough for my family to see that we're taking this seriously." She immediately put her coffee down before she spilled it. "You want me to move in with you? This is crazy." Maxon gave a half smile. "Well, up until now, this whole thing has been crazy. But this is on another level." Maxon tilted his head slightly. "Do you want the plan to work or not?" Emilia opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, because she knew he was right. If they wanted to keep up the act until the end, they needed to make it more believable. But living with him? That was a completely different level of commitment. "I don't know if I can do this," Emilia admitted, biting her lip. Maxon exhaled, leaning back slightly. "Look, I know it sounds like a lot, but think about it. You'll have your own space. You won't have to change anything in your routine. We just need to look like a couple living together for a while." Emilia took a deep breath. "This still feels wrong." Maxon crossed his arms, studying her for a moment. "Tell me, what's stopping you?" She opened her mouth and then closed it, because honestly, she didn't have a solid reason to say no. Sure, this whole situation was insane, but was it impossible? The worst part was that no matter how hard she tried to convince herself otherwise, a small part of her was curious about what it would be like to spend more time with Maxon. She sighed, feeling exhausted by her own overthinking. "I need time to think." Maxon nodded. "All right, but don't take too long. My dad is already planning to test us again." Emilia groaned and buried her face in her hands. "I hate this contract." Maxon chuckled. "Not more than I hate family dinners." She lifted her head, narrowing her eyes at him. "So we're even then." Maxon raised his coffee cup, smirking. "To our shared ruin." Emilia sighed and clinked her cup against his. "To our shared ruin." The decision. The problem was, the more time she spent with Maxon, the harder it became to remember that this was just an act. For the next few days, Emilia wrestled with her decision. Logically, moving into Maxon's house wouldn't be the end of the world. He had already assured her she'd have her own space, and she knew the arrangement wasn't permanent. And yet, that lingering doubt refused to leave. Could she really keep the line between real and fake from blurring? That was the question still bouncing around in her head when Maxon invited her to dinner at his place, saying they needed to talk. Dinner at his place. Right on time, Emilia stood at his door, mentally preparing herself for whatever conversation was about to happen. The door swung open, and there he was, wearing a button-up shirt with the first few buttons undone, which should honestly be illegal because it made it very hard for her to concentrate. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Emilia walked in, glancing around. She had been here before, but never really noticed the details. The apartment was huge, but somehow still cozy. Maxon headed to the kitchen and grabbed 2 wine glasses, pouring them each a drink. "So?" he asked, handing her a glass. Have you decided? Emilia took the glass in a deep breath before answering. Yes. I'll move in. Temporarily. Maxon raised an eyebrow. No emotional blackmail. No emotional blackmail, he smirked. You'll get used to it faster than you think. Emilia wasn't so sure about that, but she was about to find out. Moving in. Over the next few days, Emilia packed her things, mentally preparing for what was undoubtedly going to be an experience. By the end of the week, she was officially living in Maxon's house. The move itself wasn't as hard as she expected, but living together, that was a whole different story. Maxon was methodical. He liked schedules, routines, and didn't seem to understand the concept of instant coffee, because his coffee machine was more complicated than a NASA rocket manual. Emilia, on the other hand, liked her coffee strong and fast, preferred not to have set schedules, and, to her utter dismay, discovered that Maxon organized his clothes by color and type. The first morning in his house, Emilia stumbled into the kitchen wearing a baggy hoodie, her hair a mess. Maxon barely glanced up from his pristine cup of probably handcrafted gourmet-level coffee before smirking. I knew you had a laid-back style, but this is a whole new level. Emilia grabbed a slice of toast and sat down. I woke up, I'm dressed, and ready to start the day. That's already a win. Maxon chuckled and took the seat across from her. Welcome to your new home. Emilia took a bite, narrowing her eyes at him. If I find a set of house rules taped to the fridge, I'm out of here. Maxon raised his hands in surrender. No rules, just a few guidelines. She sighed, grabbing her coffee. This is going to be interesting. And just like that, without realizing it, Emilia took a step that would change everything. Because as much as she told herself this was just a fake arrangement, living with Maxon made that lie feel more and more real. Living with a billionaire, aka a test of sanity. Emilia never imagined she'd be living in a billionaire's house, let alone that the billionaire in question would be Maxon Scott. At first, she tried to stay as discreet as possible, avoiding anything that would make their situation feel even stranger than it already was. But she quickly realized that was impossible. First, because Maxon was always around. He claimed to work a lot and not spend much time at home, but somehow, he always seemed to have plenty of time to tease her. Do you always leave your socks lying around like this? He asked one evening, arms crossed, eyes locked on the very comfortable position of her bare feet on the couch. They're not scattered, they're artistically arranged, Emilia replied, eyes still glued to the TV. Maxon raised an eyebrow. Oh, I see. So modern art now includes socks thrown on the floor? She grabbed a pillow and pretended to throw it at him. You dragged me into this house, now deal with the consequences. Maxon laughed and sat down next to her. I just expected a bit more sophistication. You already knew me before hiring me, Maxon. You should have known what you were getting into. He just smiled. And that's when Emilia realized. Their little back and forth? It was starting to feel strangely natural. And that was a problem. The biggest challenge. The hardest part of living together wasn't pretending to be a couple for everyone else. It was what Emilia started feeling when they were alone. Like that night, for example. They had been invited to a charity event hosted by the Scott family. Another one of those fancy gatherings where Emilia would have to smile and pretend she belonged in that world. But this time, something felt different. She was finishing getting ready when she heard Maxon call her name. Emilia! She stepped into the hallway and found him standing there, dressed in a sharp suit. He was holding something in his hands, hesitating slightly. What's up? She asked Maxon, walked over and handed her a small box. For you. Emilia frowned, taking it from him. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate necklace with a small, sparkling pendant. What? Maxon said casually. I thought it would go well with your dress. Emilia narrowed her eyes, studying him. This wasn't part of the deal? I know. Then why are you giving this to me? Maxon hesitated for a brief moment before answering. Because I wanted to. Something tightened in Emilia's chest. She wanted to believe this was just part of the act, that he was only trying to make everything more convincing. But something about the way he looked at her made it clear that it wasn't just that. And she had no idea what to do with that realization. The charity event. The night was a success. Maxon and Emilia made their rounds, greeting influential people, posing for a few photos and blending seamlessly into the world of high society. Emilia was starting to get used to the curious stares and whispered speculations surrounding them. But what truly caught her off guard was Maxon himself. Tonight, he wasn't just keeping up appearances. He held her hand without hesitation. He laughed at her jokes effortlessly, and at one point, when he thought no one was looking, he adjusted her necklace, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. But Emilia saw, and that's when she realized the real problem wasn't the media, the contract, or even Maxon's family. It was her. She was falling in love, and she couldn't. This was a contract, a lie, something that would end soon. So why didn't her heart seem to know that? After the event, by the time they got home, the silence between them felt different, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Emilia kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch with a groan. "I never want to wear high heels again in my life," Maxon smirked, taking a seat beside her. "You did great today. You always say that." "Because it's true," Emilia sighed, tilting her head to look at him. Maxon turned his face toward her, and in that moment she knew she was about to make a mistake. But she couldn't stop herself. "This is still just a contract, right?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Maxon didn't answer right away. Then, finally, yes, but his look said otherwise, and Emilia wanted to believe his words. She wanted to convince herself that this was still just a game. But then, out of warning, Maxon lifted his hand and gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, a small gesture, simple but devastatingly intimate. Her heart pounded. She needed to get out of there. "Good night, Maxon," she said quickly, standing up and heading straight for the bedroom before she did something stupid. Because if she stayed 1 second longer, she knew she wouldn't be able to resist. And this time, there would be no way to pretend it wasn't real. A sleepless night. Emilia lay awake in bed, tossing and turning, her thoughts running wild. No matter how hard she tried to push it away, every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. The way he held her hand at the event, the way he adjusted her necklace without even realizing it, the way his gaze lingered when he moved that strand of hair from her face. None of this should matter, but it did. And that was the problem. The beginning of the end. The next morning, when Emilia finally decided to leave her room, she found Maxon in the kitchen. He was already dressed, drinking coffee as if it were just another normal day. But for Emilia, it wasn't. She took a deep breath before speaking. "We need to talk." Maxon raised an eyebrow and set his cup down on the table. Because it is." Emilia folded her arms, steadying herself. "The contract is ending." Silence. Maxon simply watched her, unreadable. "Yes, and after that we go back to our normal lives." Then, he tilted his head slightly. "Is that what you want?" A lump formed in Emilia's throat. That was exactly the question she had been avoiding. The contract would end. She would go back to her life. And Maxon? He would remain the unreachable billionaire he had always been. That's how it should be. So why did the idea of leaving make her chest ache? She forced a smile. Of course, that was the deal, right? Maxon's gaze stayed on her. "If you say so." There was something in his tone, something that made Emilia hesitate. It was almost as if he was waiting for her to say something else, but she couldn't because admitting she wanted more meant taking a risk, and Emilia had never been good with risks. A silent countdown. The following days passed too quickly. Emilia tried to convince herself that everything was fine. She stuck to her routine, ignored the tightness in her chest every time she thought about the day she'd have to pack her bags and leave this house. Maxon, on the other hand, seemed more distant, still kind, still doing his part perfectly. But there was a heaviness in the air, like they both knew something was about to change, but neither of them wanted to be the first to admit it. The night before goodbye. That evening, the silence between them was heavier than ever. Then Maxon finally spoke. "Have you packed your things?" From across the room, Emilia looked at him. "Not yet." Maxon nodded slowly. Didn't say anything else. She wanted to ask him if he wanted her to stay. Wanted to know if this had all just been a game for him, or if, like her, he was struggling with something that felt bigger than both of them. But instead, she just smiled. I'll leave tomorrow morning. Maxon nodded once more. All right. And that was it. The goodbye that wasn't meant to happen. The next morning, Emilia was finishing packing when she heard a knock on the door. She took a deep breath, then opened it. Maxon stood there, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Are you really leaving? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Emilia tried to smile, and failed miserably. That had been the plan from the start, hadn't it? But as Maxon watched her, something shifted, like his plans had just changed, and Emilia felt her heart race. A question that changed everything. Maxon took a step forward. Answer me this. If I asked you to stay, would you? Emilia opened her mouth, but no words came out. This was it. The moment she had been avoiding since the second she realized this was no longer just a contract. She could say yes. She could admit that, at some point, this had stopped being a facade for her. But what if Maxon was only asking out of pride? What if, the second she said yes, he realized he didn't want this after all? She couldn't risk it, so forcing a smile, she said, Maxon, don't make this harder than it already is. For a brief second, something flashed in his eyes, but then he just nodded slowly. I understand. And without another word, he turned and left. Emilia closed her eyes, feeling a pain in her chest she didn't want to admit. She grabbed her suitcase, took a deep breath, and walked away. A life that no longer fit. The days that followed were a blur. Emilia went back to her old routine, but nothing felt right. Her apartment felt smaller, the coffee she used to love didn't taste the same anymore, and everything, absolutely everything, reminded her of Maxon. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it was normal, that after spending so much time with him, of course it would take some time to get used to life without him. But then, 1 week later, she passed by the window of a jewelry store and stopped, because there it was, the necklace. The same delicate pendant Maxon had given her the night before the charity event. She stared at it, and something inside her snapped into place. She had made a mistake. The only choice that mattered. Emilia didn't waste another second. She hailed a taxi, gave the driver Maxon's address. The ride felt endless. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it, and when she finally arrived, she took a deep breath, then rang the doorbell. Time seemed to drag. Then, the door opened, and there he was, the same intense gaze, the same unreadable posture. But for one fleeting second, she saw surprise in his eyes. Emilia, Maxon said, voice low. What are you doing here? She inhaled sharply, trying to gather her thoughts. But then she realized she didn't need a speech, so she just took a step forward, lifted her chin, and kissed him. It was nothing like the first time. There was no impulse, no desperation, just something real. When she pulled away, she looked at him and smiled. I want to stay. Maxon didn't say anything at first, just watched her. Like he was making sure she was really there, and then, finally, he smiled. Took you long enough to figure that out, huh? A love that was never part of the plan. Emilia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. You could have told me sooner, she teased. Maxon smirked. I was waiting for you to figure it out on your own. She crossed her arms. And what if I hadn't come? He shrugged. I would have come after you. Her smile softened. Really? Really? His voice was steady, unwavering. I never planned on falling for you, Emilia, but it happened. Her heart melted. I'm glad it happened. And then, for the first time, they kissed without needing to pretend. Emilia never imagined her life would take this turn. She had started this whole thing just trying to escape an awkward situation, and now she was completely in love with Maxon Scott. A new kind of chaos. The last few months had been a whirlwind, even without a contract forcing them to stay together. But Emilia kept living with Maxon. At first she feared it was just a fleeting dream, but day by day she realized it wasn't. It was real. And, to her total surprise, Maxon seemed more and more comfortable with the idea of having her in his life. Of course, living together was still chaotic. Emilia still left her socks lying around. Maxon still organized his clothes by color, but somehow, it worked. She had never been this happy. What she didn't know was that Maxon had a plan, A big plan, and it involved a certain, very shiny ring. A suspicious fiancé. AKA the worst spy ever. It all started suspiciously. Maxon began acting strange. He made mysterious phone calls, seemed lost in thought, and, on more than one occasion, he left without saying where he was going. Emily tried to ignore it, knew it was just work stress. But after a week of his suspicious behavior, she decided she needed to investigate. And of course, she did the only logical thing. She followed him with sunglasses and a huge coat, which definitely made her look less like a spy and more like a cartoon character trying to commit tax fraud. She trailed him through the streets of New York until he stopped in front of a jewelry store. Her heart nearly stopped. He was buying a ring? Was it an engagement ring? Because if it was, she might have to pretend to faint just to have time to process the information. But then Maxon didn't go inside, he just talked to someone at the door, and then he left. Now she was too curious to walk away, so naturally she went in. The saleswoman greeted her with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" Emilia smiled nervously. Yeah. A tall, handsome, and somewhat methodical man just walked by. Was he buying something? The woman blinked. "You mean Maxon Scott?" Emilia forced a casual smile. "Yeah, that's him." The woman laughed. "He was arranging something special." Emilia's heart skipped a beat. "Something special, like really special." The saleswoman smiled mysteriously. "You'll see soon." Emilia left the store with sweaty palms and a racing heart. Now, all she had to do was wait. A proposal written in the stars. The following weekend, Maxon invited her to a special dinner. Emilia was already suspicious, so when he took her to an insanely fancy restaurant with a view of the entire city, she knew something was about to happen. And then, it did. After dinner, Maxon led her to the building's rooftop. The night breeze was gentle, the city lights sparkled below them, and Emilia felt a sudden wave of emotion at the view. "This is beautiful, Maxon," she murmured. He smiled. "Not as beautiful as you." She blinked. "Wow, that was unexpectedly romantic. I have a few more surprises for you." Before she could ask what he meant, Maxon knelt down. Emilia froze. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought she might actually faint. Maxon pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a stunning ring. Emilia brought her hands to her face. "Oh my God," Maxon smiled. "Emilia Cooper, I never planned on falling for you, but it happened." Her vision blurred with tears. "You messed up my routine, made me laugh when I didn't want to, and showed me that life can be fun, even when it feels like chaos." Her heart swelled. "That was unexpectedly sweet." Maxon chuckled. "So, my messy and adorable Emilia, will you marry me?" Emilia was so overwhelmed she forgot how to breathe. But, as always, her instinct was to make the moment uniquely hers. So instead of giving a traditional answer, she pretended to be deep in thought. I don't know," she teased. "Are you really ready for a future where your clothes will never be perfectly organized by color again?" Maxon raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I've already accepted that reality. And where my collection of socks scattered all over the apartment will only continue to grow?" "It'll be a challenge," he admitted, "but I accept it." Emilia laughed, wiping away a tear. "Then I guess I have no choice." Maxon's brow lifted. "So, does that mean yes?" She smiled, heart full. "Yes." The beginning of their forever. Maxon slipped the ring onto her finger and then kissed her. Not because they had to, not because it was expected, but because it was real. And this time, either of them ever wanted to pretend again. A kiss that changed everything. Maxon stood up, and in one swift motion he lifted Emilia into his arms. She let out a startled laugh as he spun her around, the city lights twinkling around them. Then he kissed her. And right there, in that moment, Emilia knew this kiss was nothing like the first one. No desperation, no pretense, no doubts, just them. Real, undeniable, forever. A wedding to remember. Their wedding was nothing short of a dream. The ceremony took place in a breathtaking outdoor garden, bathed in the warm glow of twinkling lights and surrounded by elegant white flowers. Maxon stood at the altar, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. his usual confidence slightly shaken by the way his smile faltered the moment he saw her. And Emilia, she walked down the aisle to the sound of soft, enchanting music, feeling like this was the most beautiful moment of her life. When she finally reached him, Maxon took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. Emilia smiled, her heart full. "You're not so bad yourself." Vows from the heart. The vows were everything. Maxon spoke first about how he had never imagined that one unexpected kiss would change his life, about how she had turned his world upside down, and how he never wanted it to go back to the way it was before her. Then Emilia spoke about how Maxon had taught her that love didn't have to be perfect to be real, that sometimes the most unexpected things end up being the most important. And then, felonly, they said, "I do." Forever begins here, when Maxon kissed her this time. There was no contract, no plan, no agreement. There was only them, two hearts, choosing each other. Forever. What did you think of Emilia and Maxon's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this love story? Let us know. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And if you love emotional, heartwarming tales, click here on the final screen to watch more.